Hello, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to do a video talking all about the ISTJ personality type. I want to talk about their cognitive functions, their strengths, their weaknesses, and what really makes ISTJs so special. They're a type that I feel like doesn't get a lot of love in the Myers Briggs community, so I really want to, take today to really talk about what makes them so unique and important. So if you don't know what a cognitive function is, that's going to be really important to this video. So actually, Myers and Briggs came later after what Carl Jung coined in 1921, which are cognitive functions. So these are the 8 cognitive functions on the screen right here. If you want to take a second and just pause it and just take a look at these if you've never heard of a cognitive function before. This is by no means exhaustive, but this can kind of get you in the right direction. I want to talk about a common mistype because the 16 Personalities website and any other online test tends to be very frequently wrong. And a lot of these tests know about cognitive functions, but they've chosen to test just based on letter dichotomies. So for that reason, they can tend to be one letter off because they're just testing based on letter dichotomies. And so ISTJs actually lead with a P function and ISTPs lead with a J function. So for that reason, there's a lot of confusion between those two types. So if you're looking at this video and you think you're an ISTJ, but you really resonate with that bottom left function, introverted thinking, and internal parsing critique of thought systems, you might want to look into ISTP because that's actually a function that ISTPs use, but the ISTJs do not use in their top conscious 4. So each of the 16 personalities uses all 8 of these cognitive functions in a very specific order in a very specific way. Some of these are strengths, some of them are weaknesses, and some of them aren't used very much at all. So for the ISTJ, this is the order that they use these cognitive functions, and I have them listed here as well as their letter abbreviation. So their first function is Introverted Sensing, and that's abbreviated SI. It's kind of the reverse order of what you might think. They list the sensing first, and then they talk about the introversion. So this is loosely speaking descending in order of importance. When you're thinking about, what has the most leverage in your personality, loosely speaking, this is in order of importance. And loosely speaking, this is kind of in chronological order for the order in which they develop throughout your life. So you kind of have, your first one comes on the scene, and then maybe in your teens and 20s, the next one gets a little bit strengthened, and then, in your 30s, your third one gets strengthened, your 40s, your fourth one gets strengthened. So your top 4 functions are conscious and you value them. You're aware of them in yourself. Maybe even if you're not good at them, you do value them in others. Like, for example, your third and fourth function aren't necessarily strengths, but you still value those in other people. And so you might choose a partner or a spouse or someone who has those as a strength in themselves. Your bottom 4 functions are not valued and they're not conscious. So to add a little bit more nuance to this, the functions in green are potential strengths and the functions in red are probable weaknesses. Now, this isn't 100% of the time, and the older you get, the more likely that some of these red zones will become green zones if you're pursuing, growth throughout your lifetime. And if you're getting better and better as a person. But if you're like in your 20s, this is kind of like the default mode for how these functions show up. But I want to give a caveat. So just because 5 and 6 are green and potential strengths doesn't mean you should necessarily focus on those things first, because this is still descending in order of importance. So I would just kind of work your way down the list numerically in order of, which ones, if you want to focus on certain functions first. So I have kind of this matrix here in the top 4 functions. Since these are the functions that are conscious and valued, there's so much meat to unpack here. So I really want to focus on this video on the top 4 functions. But I have this matrix of overused, underused, strength, and weakness. So your first function is an overused strength. It's great that you use it so much of the time. It's who you feel like you are, but it's one of those things where if you have a hammer, you think everything's a nail. So you kind of can end up trying to fit a square peg into a round hole sometimes because it's just you use it too much of the time. And it's great that you use it a lot, but not 100% of the time. Your second function is an underused strength. So this is a function that came on a little bit later on in the scene. It's something that you naturally were just like born with a talent for, but you need to kind of build the skill in it. You kind of tend to neglect it, and it has a potential to be a strength, but you do have to lean into and work on that thing because the tendency is to neglect it. Your third function is an overused weakness. So this is the function that you tend to go to in times of conflict, defensiveness, and so it can be kind of overused. It's something that we think is a better tool than what it actually is. There can be some ego and cowardice in this function. And everyone's fourth function is an underused weakness. It's so underused that sometimes you don't even notice it in the individual at all. It's kind of the opposite of who they feel like they are. But it can be good to sprinkle this in. The reason that this one's a weakness is because it's not used enough. The third one, it's a weakness because you use it too much, but this one's a weakness because you don't use it enough. And if you could sprinkle it into yourself, it actually can really add some nice color. So these are some quotes here. I'm not going to really go into these because I have a video all about these, but these are quotes from Carl Jung, John Beebe, Myers and Briggs about the different functions and what role they play. So if you want to pause it and take a look at some quotes from them, you can go ahead and take a look at that, but I'm going to go ahead and move on. Okay, so the first function for ISTJs is Introverted Sensing, or abbreviated SI. So the word introvert doesn't necessarily mean to be alone. It's kind of become, that word has become a lot of different things recently. It's where you get your energy and da-da-da. But what introvert means is to turn inward. Vert means to turn, and intro means inward. And Carl Jung got the word introvert and extrovert from introspection and externospection, which means to watch over what's happening inwardly or to watch over what's happening outwardly. So everyone has both of these parts. If you see your second function is extroverted thinking, but your first one is introverted. So everyone's kind of an ambivert. Everyone has these parts where you can look outward and you can look inward, because it'd be kind of weird if you could never look outward or look inward. So it's to turn inward toward the senses. So senses is what you're experiencing. So that could be senses like within your body. Carl Jung talks about them having very finely attuned sense organs. So very aware of, are they feeling a little tired? Is the sweater a little itchy? Do I need to take my vitamins? Should I wear SPF? Very in tune to sensory organs and very interested in that type of thing. But it could also be turning inward toward your experiences in a matter of reflection and a remembrance and combing back through your memories. When you're doing an internal processing of your sensory experiences, that's very similar to just combing back through your memories. Carl Jung and John Beebe also talk about how it's not just their own memories, but it's also kind of like mankind's, like this long-standing and really impacted by things that are not impacted by the changing of the passing of time. So one word that I used to describe introverted sensing a lot is timeless. Receptive to things having lasting value, kind of seeing things as a million-year-old consciousness would see them. Seeing things from age-old subjective experience. There's a lot of wisdom. There's a lot of reverence for lineage, sometimes history. It really depends on the ISTJ. I think the TE really colors ISTJs very differently than the FE would color ISFJs, but still definitely very interested in not reinventing the wheel. We don't need to continue throwing spaghetti at the wall when there's so much of this tried and true tested experience that has come before us. So your first function is the function that you feel like, it's who you feel like you are. It's the function that's been with you the longest, since you were a child, this tendency to look inward and reflect, and a reverence for the past and a reverence for the body. That's something that's been with you your whole life if you're an ISTJ. So this is the function that it's like the water you swim in. And so this is your overused strength. This is a function that is great if you use it much of the time. It's not great to use it 100% of the time, but it's great that you use it so much of the time. So I put this quote here, funeral mentality, and I wanted to mention that there's this exercise that I've had a lot of good results when I talk with ISJs about this question, and it's think about your funeral and what you want people to say about you at your funeral and living your life in such a way. And I think that's such a good quote for any of the SJs, because it puts you in a past-looking lens in a way that helps you think of what's timeless, what really matters, what are the things of lasting value. And it's a way to kind of meaningfully reflect kind of in the past. It's this frame that can kind of put you in the past. So it's kind of an interesting question. Carl Jung talks about their sense impressions develop into the depth of the meaningful. Things will stir them. There'll be remembrance. It might be something, it's like an everyday thing that happened. It wasn't a big flashy experience. It was just an everyday thing. You were having coffee with your brother or something, and for whatever reason that moment really stirred something in you and really left its mark on you. And it's very subjective what type of things will. And introverted sensors, I find, really enjoy talking about their memories and talking about events with people. This could be stories. I'm always surprised at what they will remember. It's almost idiosyncratic, the type of things that they'll remember. They're marked by being very calm, passive, and temperate. When I was a teacher, these are people that tended to be very good students, very, they're kind of like the model students. They listen, they do what the teacher says a lot of the time. Very good students, ISTJs in particular. I know a lot of very academic ISTJs. I actually don't know if I can think of one that I know that's not very academic. That's a big difference between ISTPs and ISTJs. I think the school system does really well for the ISTJs, and I think the school system really underserves the ISTPs. So that can be one difference, going back to that mistype. They do really well with routine, kind of a warmth, coziness, a familiar environment. They notice like the changing of the seasons. I found a lot of times with SI users, the fall, the things that come out in the fall, kind of, it's this ebb and flow of time, these things that keep going. And seasons are one of those things that are not affected by the changing of time. So cozying up with a book is something that's very temperate and calm and cozy. Fall poetry, these are things. And then another thing about them is they're very thorough and detail-oriented, incredibly detail-oriented. This is some of the most detail-oriented types, the types that have introverted sensing. So I've got this little planner here there. I've noticed a lot of ISTJs that will have a little planner. And I have some pictures here. You've got family portraits. Sometimes, a lot of times Introverted Sensing likes to collect maybe magnets from trips that they've went on, or little tokens that can kind of trigger memories in you. Then I've got like the Fitbit there. Definitely ISTJ is the most likely type that I've known to have a Fitbit, because the TE has an interest in metrics, but SI likes the interest in the body, and so the body's metrics. They tend to be very aware of, SPF or needing to wear a helmet. There were lots of quotes from Carl Jung about having a protective guard, and so that's something that definitely comes up a lot as well. So Introverted Sensing is an incredibly wise function. This is a function where people seem really wise beyond their years. So Introverted Sensing is your introverted function. And Carl Jung talks about this gives you access to yourself and to reflection. That's what introversion gives you access to. You're turning inward and watching over what happens inwardly. So it's not necessarily like sitting on the couch watching Netflix. Because when you're watching Netflix, you're turning outward, despite maybe you're alone. So it's important to turn inward and to reflect and to process things. And that's what this function does. It's processing things of longstanding value. But your second function gives you access to the world and to action taking, and these are both so important. So extrovert means to turn outward, or if you take that word externospection, where he got the word extrovert, it means to watch over what's happening outwardly. And among all of the things that are happening outwardly, it's watching over the thinking criteria. So this is kind of the logical criteria that's happening outwardly. So a lot of times that's logistics, managing people, schedules, goals, making sure that things are done on time. There's a lot of focus on logistics. This can be a really big focus with extroverted thinking. So the number one word that Carl Jung used was systems. And I have a book recommendation here because your second function is an underused strength. So this is a function, everyone tends to neglect their second function. And the reason they tend to neglect it is because this one's extroverted and you're an introvert. So it's so comfortable to be an introvert, and there's kind of an indulgence there. But you really miss out on action taking in the world when you miss out on extroversion. I recommend this book, Getting Things Done. It is a book that Personality Hacker had recommended for extroverted thinkers if they want to work on extroverted thinking, and it is so great. It's basically a bunch of project management skills. I actually have several videos about how to work on TE on my channel. One is about projects, is a very good project management system video that I will link that I think is very good for extroverted thinkers. So I have an arrow here about, kind of the action step or what to do with it, or something that I wanted to point out. I think this is a John Maxwell quote, but we're overeducated well beyond the realm of our action. And that's something that if you tend to neglect extroverted thinking, as the ITJs do, this can be something where they're very educated, they learn, and they use TE in a way to soak up all this information and become an academic and be very well read, but they never do anything with it or take the action step beyond it. So that's kind of the advice for ITJs, is to get into actually acting on these systems. And this function, John Beebe calls it the parent function. It's a way you can set expectations for yourself. A lot of times we tend to neglect this one because if you're an introvert, this is an extroverted function, and there can be kind of some cowardice Carl Jung talks about with going into an extroverted space. Sometimes you can kind of procrastinate with your second function. I'll just push it off, and then things begin to kind of pile up and it just gets kind of scary. But this is the parent function. It takes some maturity to step into this function and to set some expectations for yourself and say, you know what, I don't want to just go through life being so indulgent. I want to set expectations for myself and really meet my potential. So that's what this function really does. It adds a lot of complexity. Carl Jung talks about if you're just in your first function, you can be kind of one-dimensional. But if you get into that second function, it adds complexity. This is where you get this ISTJ. You wouldn't be an ISTJ without your T function. So it's a lot about outcomes, goals, product, results. I've got a lot of images here. It's a lot about leadership, leading a group of people through this plan, through this schedule, through this timeline. So they like to be the organizer, be very authoritative, to govern. And so I've got, an action step is to get in a leadership role. I know a lot of ISTJs who are on the board, like on the board at church or on a school board, or maybe a vice principal if they don't want to be the main principal. But in general, ISTJs do really well working their way up through an organization. That's something that I think ISTJs kind of underestimate themselves, or maybe it seems a little nerve-wracking to get into a leadership role, but they really shine in those spaces. And it's one of those things where you don't need to be the best leader you can possibly be. Like, I think ISTJs have such high expectations for themselves, and you don't need to meet that expectation. You just need to be better than everybody else. And I think ISTJs, you are better than a lot of these other people. You don't need to be a perfect leader. You just have to be better than all the other options. And I think ISTJs are better than a lot of the other options. I had an ISTJ vice principal, and I thought that he did a phenomenal job, one of the best vice principals I was under. So TE is a lot about progress, execution, and determination. And so I think it's just a lot about going from that student, that academic, to actually being the leader, being kind of at the forefront, pushing yourself into spaces a little bit more like that. Because we need leaders who have that introversion, who have that capacity for a lot of, reflection and access to the self, but then taking that to the world and action taking with it. So your second function can be kind of watered down. Like there are some of these words here, outcomes, goals, organizer, authoritative, execution, and your second function can tend to be pretty watered down as the default because people tend to neglect it. This is something where, I've got a picture here of someone just writing in a planner. A lot of times for an ITJ, they just kind of keep it in that realm. I'm going to read about organization. I'm going to have my little planner that I organize my logistics in a very one-on-one way, in a very private way. But it's starting to expand your capacity for TE gradually over time to grow in it and to actually lead from the forefront. So it's very business-like, this function you can see from these pictures, very business-like outlook, planning, very decisive. This is something that ITJs can grow in, is being decisive and deciding things quickly. Done is better than perfect. Sometimes the introverted functions, they have a tendency for reflection, and that can be so slow. And it's like, okay, come on. And then, thinking about things. And then in the end, they just come back to whatever, the first thing was. But they wanted to think on it, mull it over a little more. But just decide things quickly. Done is better than perfect. Something that I hear from ETJs a lot is to fail fast. So it's a lot better to make decisions quickly and fail 20 times you've learned so much in the time that you could have mulled over just the one decision. If you fail fast, you can learn, the consequences of 20 different decisions in the time that when you mulled something over, you would just learn the information from one decision. So there can be a lot of fear in this function, but I think it's, the feeling that you get when you're on the other side of it, when you've really kind of conquered this, you're an ISTJ, and when you really do that T function, it really feels like you're coming home to yourself. And so that's something that I think is so important for people to do. So this is something that I recommend you work on for an extended amount of time, like 5 years. Myers Briggs talk about it's really important to isolate this function so that you can really develop it. Not this one necessarily in particular, but they do talk about working on the second function, but to isolate a function if you want to work on it. Work on this, for 5 years, get around TE DOMs. Get in leadership roles, read Getting Things Done and actually apply it. Be in charge of more logistics, scheduling, planning, being the organizer and manager of things. Get into more of this space, push yourself little by little, just expand your comfort zone a little bit at a time because it has such great rewards. So your third function, in kind of contrast to this, is the child function. So if your second function is the parent, the third one is the child. And they are the direct opposites of each other. So your second function is extroverted, your third one's introverted. Your second one is thinking, and the opposite of thinking is feeling. So these are direct opposites of each other, North Pole and the South Pole. So the thing about the North Pole and the South Pole is you can only be in one at a time. So if you choose to be in the second function, you're choosing not to be in the third. Or if you choose to be in the third function, you're choosing not to be in the second function because you cannot be at the North Pole and the South Pole at the same time. So a lot of people, because the third function is introverted, there's a lot of indulgence there that you're an introvert, you want to be in this, people will choose this third function. But by choosing this third function, you're choosing to not be in your second function. So you're choosing to not be an ISTJ if you go to this third function. You're basically choosing to not be yourself, which is so hard. And I've heard so many people talk about when they finally get out of that third function, they go back to their second function. They feel like it's coming home to themselves because people tend to be in their third function so much. So your third function is introverted feeling, and introvert means to turn inward. And there's lots of things you could watch over what's happening inwardly. But in this case, it's your feelings, your emotions, your values, your convictions, how you feel about things and how things strike you. And this is something I think a lot of people don't know about ISTJs, but there's a lot of sensitivity in this introverted feeling. This is a big difference between ISTJs and ISTPs, but there's a lot of sensitivity within ISTJs that they kind of shield themselves from, but there is a lot of sensitivity there. It's a very sensitive function, and it's a child, so it's a sensitive function in a very childlike position, so there's a lot of sensitivity here. But this third function can really be a tripping up point for people because it's kind of like a bratty teenager. There's a lot of ego here. People think that they're better in this function than they actually are. It's in this red zone. It's overused because it's introverted. And so there can be just so many issues with this function, but the main one being that by choosing to be in this one, you're choosing not to be a thinker. You're choosing not to be yourself. So the number one word used with introverted thinking is moral or misunderstood. These are both very commonly used words by Carl Jung. So moral law, it's an inner certainty. So one issue that can crop up, I've got this arrow of how this can be used once it's in the red zone, it's in this third position, is you take the regulating nature with TE, because TE likes to organize and govern, and you take the values nature with FI. And people can go around kind of regulating values and morals. Really, I've seen ISTJs really strongly regulate political or religious values to their children. I've seen them, do it at work, but there can be a strong regulation of values, which is really not the appropriate use for an ISTJ. There's some people that's really good for them to talk about values, but for ISTJs, if they're going to regulate things, it needs to be impersonal things. It needs to be logistics, regulate schedules, timelines, impersonal things, because it's not really their strength to talk about these values, morals. And in fact, ITJs can talk about it kind of how bratty teenagers do. It's kind of like the teenager who just learned about politics for the first time, or who really became like a religious zealot in their religion or something. It can be just too much when it's in this red zone. So it's really better for ITJs to regulate things that are impersonal. Introverted feeling has a lot of disappointment in the brutal world. They have a lot of sensitivity and they're critical toward the world. Introverted feeling has high ideals for how people need to be. And so this critical disappointment, if it's not in the green zone and if you're not using it to create art or be this type of artist who's on the forefront of really change, which ISTJs tend not to be, not that they couldn't be, but I wouldn't say they tend to be because their strengths are a lot more in TE and SI, which lend themselves to different things. So their conversations can revolve a lot around criticisms, criticizing the workplace, work is going terrible, or my boss is doing this. And so if you get too much entrenched in FI, it can be just kind of a negative Nancy, which I have written down below, but I guess I'll get to. FI can have a lot of moods, pessimism, discouragement, can be a sensitive darling, and it also can really stagnate a person's behavior. So TE never, it says that like TE DOMs, they never stagnate. That's not necessarily how ISTJs are, but it's very productive and focused on making progress and doing things well. But FI can just get in these moods and that stagnates productivity and just getting kind of entrenched in these moods, or I'm not feeling it, or I don't feel like it, or if anyone criticizes TE things, they can be very sensitive in particular to those things. So it really is just not beneficial, and it's kind of this entrenchment in FI that never really goes anywhere. It's just this pool where they think, okay, if I just keep processing this negative emotion, or if I just keep thinking about this negative emotion, it'll go away, but that doesn't actually help it go away. Introverted feeling, there's a lot about it being hidden. There's a hidden depth. There's these deep emotions, these deep values, and a lot of times for introverted feeling DOMs, it's not seen on the surface. And I think for as well ISTJs, it's not seen. And so there were quotes about FI and TI, but they have kind of a mask on that you're not really seeing the full picture. So they have kind of this secondary emotional mask and can be very isolated. So if you're too much in introverted sensing and introverted feeling, if you're really entrenching yourself in that introversion, it's very isolated. And introversion only gives you access to the self. So especially with FI, it can be kind of poor me. It's very focused on the self, very isolated. And sometimes I think that ITJs will use TE as a mask to cover up those deep FI feelings that they have in there. They have these FI feelings that are so hard, so they put up this stone mask, kind of with TE. I have this stone image there. They're very stone-faced, but there is this hidden depth going on in there. And so it can really isolate them, and I think part of why they're isolated is people don't know how much they care. I think introverted sensing and introverted feeling, those two functions care so much about people, and so deeply, SI can be very family-oriented. FI is very sensitive and a lot of deep emotion. So they care and are very loyal to a lot of people. But I think people don't know that a lot. And so I think taking that mask off is something that would be good for introverted feeling. Introverted feeling is very individualistic with no desire to impress. And so that can lead people to wonder, like, do you even like me? Because sometimes, they have no desire to impress. So there are certain types, FE types, that they'll smile a lot more just the whole time you're in a conversation with them, they're nodding their head the whole time when you're talking to them because they've got this FE. But, FE is not anywhere in the top 4 of the valued conscious functions for an ISTJ. So a lot of times it's kind of like, do you like me? I don't really know. I can't really read you, what's going on here. So something where I think if you get into TE is a lot more communicative. That's sometimes a criticism of TE users. TE DOMs do so much communicating, very good with their words. And so since you tend to neglect that function, it's good to get into that function and let people know where they stand, in a very direct way. If you care about people, tell them that you care about them. So I have kind of this addition equation here. So introverted feeling is constantly comparing the world to an ideal standard, which it's never measuring up to. This could be a religious standard. There's a lot of spiritual things with introverted feeling. This could be, just an ideal that they have always had, but the way things should be. So they're comparing the world to the ideal, and of course the world's never going to measure up to that. And then introverted sensing is routinely comparing the past to the present. How these are things that worked in the past, and now we're doing these new things, and we feel like people are throwing spaghetti at the wall, and so why can't we do the tried and true thing? In addition to kind of just being critical with introverted feeling, all of these things in a first function, third function loop can create just kind of this person that's kind of like a negative Nancy, is how I wanted to put it. But that is not who ISTJs really are. They're not ISFJs with this introverted feeling. They're ISTJs. And so it's so good for them to choose to not be in their third function, but to go up to the North Pole and go up to their second function, the parent function. And, introverted feeling does give some good things to ISTJs. It does color it in certain ways. It's got this very interesting sensitivity that I think you don't know if you don't know an ISTJ really closely. This is something that a lot of people don't know about ISTJs. But the second function will parent the third function and say, okay, FI, we're going to use you in these appropriate ways. It's good if it's going to bond people to us. It's good that it gives you personal values, but we're not going to use you in these ways where you're regulating and pushing your values onto other people. If it's going to make you moody or depressive and that never resolves itself, okay, we're not going to use you in those ways. We're going to continue to be who we really are. And so it's good to subordinate your third function to your second function, because your second function has so much more wisdom in it. And your second function is such a place of impact on other people. Your first function is just like you're a natural at it. And it's hard to teach people things you're a natural at. But your second function, if you work on it for 5 years and you really put in the hard work and you were born with a talent for it, but you had to earn the skill in it over several years, then you can really impact people and teach people how to do those things. And that's where you can have so much impact. But by choosing to be in the third function, you kind of rid yourself of all that impact that the second function, the parent function, gives. And it's the way you can mentor and parent other people. So the third function plays a huge role in people. I know a lot of people who will type themselves based on the third function. So this third function, because it's this bratty teenager, it's this place you can go to sometimes in arguments. Like I know a lot of ITJs who will actually get kind of this indignant righteousness from FI, if I can have these indignant outbursts sometimes. I've known ISTJs who will do, they cry actually a lot in arguments, which is not their MO, but introverted feeling is very sensitive. I'm of the opinion that if people are involuntarily single, so you want to be in a relationship, but you feel like you're ready, but you just can't find anybody, whatever the deal is, a lot of times it's because people are too much in their third function. I think that really, if you want to be a mature person, you want to find a mature person, I think that second function is really a good spot to lean into, because it gives you a blend. Some people are too isolated, some people are putting themselves out there too much or whatever. If the issue is with yourself, I think sometimes that third function is a good place to look. And finally, your fourth function. This fourth function is an underused weakness. So this is a function that John Beebe talks about. It's kind of your inferiority complex. Like you think you're really bad at it, and you aren't that great at it, but you're not as bad as you think you are. So your fourth function is the direct opposite of your first function. So if your first function is introverted, your fourth one's extroverted. If your first one is sensing, the opposite of sensing is intuition. So extroverted intuition is your fourth function. And since your first function is who you feel like you are, and it tends to be your overused strength, and these are opposites, North Pole and South Pole, and you cannot beat the North Pole and the South Pole at the same time. And if you feel like your first function is who you are, and you can't beat the North and South Pole at the same time, people tend to basically never be in their fourth function, especially the younger they are. Once you're in your 40s, this starts to come up a little bit more actually, but if we were talking 20s, this is a function that's just tends to be non-existent from people's personalities. So extrovert means to turn outward, and intuition is the opposite of sensing. So it's the opposite of what you have sensed or what you have experienced. So it's things you have not experienced, and wanting to put those into the outer world. So, an idea, that's something you haven't tangibly experienced, but you want to put that out into the world. Or this could be the future. You haven't tangibly experienced the future, but, creating an exciting future. So it's a lot about possibilities. The number one word for extroverted intuition is possibilities. And if this was up in the green zone, a lot of times this is exciting possibilities. But Carl Jung talked about in the Introverted Sensing section, that their extroverted intuition, they have a knack for every gloomy and dirty possibility. They're constantly looking at, is this dangerous? What could this happen? Okay, I need to wear a helmet because what if this happens? And it's looking for all the dirty, gloomy possibilities. But if you can sprinkle in some extroverted intuition, it allows you to feel a little bit more optimism and expectant for the promising possibilities. Introverted sensing has a lot of reverence for the past and is kind of scared of the future. And extroverted intuition tends to kind of forget the past and sees this exciting, expectant, promising future. And so it's good, since you're an introverted sensor, to be in that reverent mode most of the time. That's who you are. Do not abandon your first function. But sprinkle in a little bit of this extroverted intuition for this optimism for the future. There are a lot of quotes about introverted sensing can feel this ponderous caution. They can feel very helpless, sometimes in a sensory environment. And extroverted intuition, it throws caution to the wind. We don't need to think about it and ponder it for so long. Let's travel. It might be scary. I can think of all the things that could go wrong on this, but I'm just going to try something new. I want to go somewhere new. I want to travel. So that's something that extroverted intuition is really good at. The quotes about introverted sensing can sometimes just continue on doing things in the same old way and not really mix things up. And it's really good in general for introverted sensors to have this routine, and that's a huge part of them. But to sprinkle in some imagination, some novelty, some hobbies. I know a lot of ISTJs who are actually into crafting. Acoustic guitar is one. It's something that you don't expect from them, because I've heard people say that you don't really know someone until you've seen their fourth function. And it can be a long time. You can be an acquaintance with someone for a long time before you ever see even hints of this fourth function. But yeah, so if something's not working, try something new. Extroverted intuition is really good at just abandoning things. This isn't working, let's just abandon it, let's move on to something new. And it sees the future expectantly. So when it sees change, it's not thinking like, oh no, okay, what could happen with this change? But it's very excited about what this change could be. So if your job's not working, or if you find that if you've been in FI a lot and you've been complaining about something for a while, try something new. Maybe it's time to up and leave. There can be a SI, their quotes about can have a passive resistance to anything new. But instead of a passive resistance, have this can sprinkle in some radiant enthusiasm. And extroverted intuitors actually show this a lot on their face. Like, oh, that'd be so exciting. And so I think that, if you can genuinely cultivate this radiant enthusiasm, that will show on your face. There are certain types. FE is really good at putting on a certain face, always just seeming happy for other people and being affirming and empathetic to other people. ITJs, they don't have any of this FE, and the ability to fake things really will come across very fake. And so what I've found is for FI users, if they want to come across happy, they need to genuinely be happy. And it's a deep work to actually cultivate this radiant enthusiasm so that you don't have to fake being happy. It's a deep work of it. And when you do extroverted intuition, you actually take these unknown things, these unknown ideas, these what ifs, and you bring it into known. And so instead of thinking what's the worst that can happen, it becomes what's the best that can happen. And so it's a lot of expectancy. And so in general, your first function is who you are. That's what you should do. But to sprinkle in this fourth function, I think gives a lot of enthusiasm and excitement for life and a vibrance for life. Because the types have this belief, my first function and my first function only will get me what my first function wants. And a lot of times it is the right tool for the job, but there are some scenarios where it's just a square peg in the round hole. You take introverted sensing and you want to plan for the future. It is just not the best tool for the job. And that's something that everyone has to think about, is planning for the future. And so if you're in a situation where you need to plan for the future, try to do it with extroverted intuition. Think about, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. The possibilities are limitless. They're exciting. There's an expectancy there. And I don't have to think about the gloomy, dirty possibility. I have this part of myself. I have this extroverted intuition part of myself. And this is the best tool for the job. Because, thinking about these gloomy, dirty possibilities, the point of it was to keep me safe. But, look at all these extroverted intuitives. They've been kept safe, and they're just excited about the future. So maybe it would just help me to get out of these gloomy feelings and, get out of some of this FI, these gloomy feelings. And what's going to happen is going to happen either way. So I might as well just have an optimistic attitude while it's happening. So I recommend people work on this function for a couple years after they've worked on your second function. So what tends to happen is your second and third function are kind of out of balance. They're kind of out of whack. People tend to be way in their third function. So I first recommend for about 5 years getting that axis, your second and third axis, in balance. So work on your second function for about 5 years. And then once you've really done that, you feel like you've really worked on TE, Then for a couple years, you work on NE. You work on sprinkling that into your personality because it can really whisper at your life purpose and kind of gives hints in that direction. And I think that everyone's fourth function, it's a little bit vulnerable because it's the inferiority complex, but you're better at it than you think that you are. Your capacity for creativity and trying new things. And I think introverted sensors, they want this stability. They want this a stability, this long-standing relationships, long-standing career. But sometimes maybe the thing wasn't good to begin with, and then they just kind of stick with something for too long. And actually changing around a little bit would actually be the thing that would lend to long-term stability. Sometimes staying in the same broken thing is actually what's causing instability. So actually, not all the time, but sometimes hopping around a little bit will actually give you the stability that you want. So yeah, I think if the types have the courage to get a little bit more in their second and fourth function, there's so much rewards on the other side of it. Your second function is how you can really impact people especially in a mentorship capacity, or what you can really teach people to do. And your fourth function adds a lot of the spice of life and the fun of life. I was just thinking about when I was doing student teaching to be a math teacher, I studied under an ISTJ. And it was so interesting. It was right during the time that a lot of math curriculums were really changing from like Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2 to integrated. So integrating all 3 years, you're kind of doing parts of algebra and geometry concepts. And I was so interested in trying the new thing. I'm like, yes, I want to hop on anything new. So we try this, and then the next year I would try something else. And the next year I'm trying like flexible seating. And I was trying all these different systems, and after about maybe like 5 or 6 years, I ended up kind of coming back to what he had been doing the whole time, because he was a lot more resistant to just trying all this new things. So he just kept doing what he had been doing, and he was still following the guidelines of the district, but with what he could control, he kept things pretty traditional. And a lot of teachers have then come back to doing what he was doing the whole time, which I think is kind of a testament to, ISTJs being able to see things of long-standing value. But there were some new things that he would integrate. So I thought that he did a really good job that in general, he kept the foundation the same. But then there were some things that we would start incorporating a lot more manipulatives and a lot more visuals at the high school setting, which is not necessarily very common in the high school setting. And so he would start doing that. He was very, open to what would have long-standing value. He would, like on Pi Day, he'd bring an acoustic guitar, that's a little NE, and he would sing this like song that like I still remember and kids still remember. So it's a way to really, make the information stick. But he taught me a lot of really good TE systems. This is, how he organizes the grade book, and this is how he stores files. And, there's a lot of like logistic type things to like, how can we run this as efficiently as possible? And so he really set me up in a great way for all these systems. He gave me, access to all of his materials, which I was able to use. And he really encouraged me to like make them my own. I think that was a little NE sprinkled in. He's like, and a little FI, I suppose, you take your individuality and your ideas and you make it your own. And so he was someone who was really balanced. And again, he was probably 50 at this point. So he had a little bit more working understanding than like a younger person would of these 4 functions. But I was so grateful to him, and I feel like he's a really good example of what ISTJs can really bring. And he ended up becoming department head, and he led meetings so well. I was there from like the transition, and he led things really well. And I think he did great in the background, but also he led so well at the forefront as well. And so I think that, being kind of like a department head is a way to kind of inch in to some more full-on TE, it's not, it's not the principal or something, that big scale leadership, but like a department head is something where you can have a lot of impact, and he had a lot of wisdom to share. And he had been at that school, that SI, he liked the school, and he had been there for so long. I think when I was there, it was his 20th year, and so he had such impact just because of the longevity for which he had been there. So I really respected his longevity, and so I think that he's a great example of, he was not in FI very much either. So he's a great example of someone who was very responsible in TE and didn't allow FI to run the show. So yeah, I love ISTJs. If you want a deep dive into any of these cognitive functions, I have like 45-minute deep dives on each of the cognitive functions, reading through Carl Jung and Vanderhoop and Myers and Briggs writing. So yeah, I will have that linked in the description box if you're interested in any of those cognitive functions. It's in the cognitive function playlist. As well as I have a playlist for the ISTJ personality types. So if you want to know all the videos I've done that apply to ISTJs, that will be in the description box. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.